But let's go over some of those statistics that you mentioned when it comes to childcare affordability and accessibility.
Sure. So prior to taking on this role here at the Chester County Chamber, I worked for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And post-pandemic, they had really honed in on this issue because they kept using this one statistic: 1 million women were missing from the workforce post-pandemic. So during the pandemic, a lot of childcare centers had closed, which then led to the 2-year wait lists. And so women were just leaving the workforce at alarming rates. And, highly educated, productive women. So these are good employees that you want to keep. And then I started to see some of these nonprofits that are geared towards tracking this information, talking about it from the business perspective. 60% of employees in this one survey said, I'm late to work or I'm not productive because of childcare breakdowns. More concerning than that, 27% of respondents in the same survey had said, I had to quit my job or I was fired because of childcare breakdown. This is thousands of people responding to this survey saying this is a huge issue.
Hey mama, welcome to the Working Moms Playbook, the go-to podcast for moms balancing careers and babies. I'm your host, Antonia DePace, former editor, current marketing maven, and mom of one. Each week, we're breaking down the systems, mindsets, and support every working mom needs to thrive, whether it be at work, at home, or everywhere in between. So let's get into it. Well, welcome back to the Working Moms Playbook. I am your host, Antonia DePace. On today's episode, I have Laura Manion, who is the Chester County Chamber of Business and Industry President and CEO. We are going to be talking more about the childcare affordability and accessibility crisis. Welcome, Laura.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on. Let's just dive right in. You do a lot of work around affordability and accessibility for childcare, but you are also a soon-to-be mom of 3. So talk to me more about why this topic is really important to you.
Yes. So a lot of times I'll hear from people why is a Chamber of Commerce, which is low taxes, regulatory reform, doing all these business issues, talking about childcare. And it's really just my story. I took this job when I was 6 months pregnant with my first son. And when I was 5 months pregnant, I was touring different childcare providers with my husband, and we were put on 3 wait lists. And then when my son was 9 months old, I hadn't gotten off of any of those wait lists.
No way.
So I took him to work with me. I went back to work right away. I became the CEO of this major organization and just kind of felt okay, I need to be present. So I'm in my office now. I had a pack and play in the corner. I would literally nurse him on a pillow at my desk, while taking meetings off camera. It was crazy. And I, kept waiting and checking in with these places. And they were okay, I'm so sorry. We don't have any availability. There's no openings and we'll stay in touch. So I really just was this is a huge issue. I actually wrote this op-ed behind me about the affordability and accessibility crisis. And it sort of catapulted me as this accidental expert in the childcare sphere, but bringing the business perspective to it of we can't be productive employees if we don't have reliable childcare. And so it's been 3 years of this journey that I've been on, just talking about it and looking at the statistics and the numbers. And I've been able to create this statewide platform, just, not just for myself, but for the childcare industry and for providers and workers and parents who are just struggling. And it's been really great to be able to say I've made a difference.
You are a total idol for me because I I have a very similar story. I got pregnant with my son, and while we didn't go on any daycare list right away, it was more so because of the fact that I was nervous about the wait lists. I was nervous about everything that really comes along with being a first time mom and sending my kid to daycare. I worked from home, but I too was, pack and play in the corner,
Yeah.
scheduling meetings around
That's
nap
what
times.
you have to do, and you make
Yep.
it work.
Yeah, I remember like my morning schedule when John was still a newborn. It would be like, wake up, nurse, get him dressed and changed, and come downstairs and eat. And then I'd be like on my computer, and I used the breast friend nursing pillow, and that would literally be like, it's the best. It would literally be wrapped
It's
around me.
big in
He would
my house,
be,
like they're
yeah.
everywhere.
He would be nursing and I'd be typing on my computer as he's nursing.
Yeah,
And like he would fall asleep and he'd go up for his nap and it's just like it's a wild ride that no one really thinks about and it's so hard. Um
and I
what
think
would
it
you
falls like on women a lot because
yeah.
my husband works at Vanguard. He's like, I can't bring a baby to an office, and I'm like,
Mhm.
I can't bring a baby to an office, but here I am, and I'm figuring it out.
Yeah.
So that was like another thing too of just like how much working parents for sure, but working moms, like this is just
Mhm.
such an issue.
Yeah, and it's something that there's already so much to think about when you are pregnant and you're planning to have a baby and this is just something that like tacks onto it, right? Especially as you start to figure out your maternity leave and like how
Yeah,
long you're even going to have with your baby and how quickly that
yeah,
turnover is going to be. It can be a fairly emotional process as well.
yeah.
But let's go over some of those statistics that you mentioned when it comes to childcare affordability and accessibility.
Sure. So prior to taking on this role here at the Chester County Chamber, I worked for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Hmm.
And post pandemic, they had really honed in on this issue because they kept using this one statistic 1 million women were missing from the workforce post pandemic. So during
Wow.
the pandemic, a lot of childcare centers had closed, which
Hmm.
then led to the 2 year wait lists. And so
Okay.
women were just leaving the workforce at alarming rates. And, highly educated, productive women. So these are
Hmm.
good employees that you want to keep. So more and more, I started to really, and this was before I even had my son, but I started to really dive into the issue. And then I started to see some of these nonprofits that are geared towards tracking this information, talking about it from the business perspective. Like 60% of employees in this one survey said, I'm late to work or I'm not productive because of childcare breakdowns. More concerning than that, 27% of respondents in the same survey had said, like, I had to quit my job or I was fired because of childcare breakdown. So, like, the numbers were there of like how many, this is thousands of people are responding to this survey saying,
Hmm.
like, this is a huge issue. And then when we started to talk about it, when I wrote the op ed, I started to hear from employers all over saying, you know, this makes sense. I own a veterinary practice and 90% of vet techs are women and I keep losing employees. Or
Wow.
Comcast, Vanguard, all the major health networks, nurses that are just like not able to go to work because they can't get their children to work. And like even in the mom group that I am in, we had a child care center right down the street from our house on a Friday afternoon said, if your child isn't here 5 days a week, like if you're in care 3 days, we can no
Hmm.
longer accept you as, a participant here starting Monday. And they
Oh,
sent
wow.
that email Friday night at 9 o'clock. So like
Wait,
imagine
that was
as
a
an,
mom group?
like this was a child care provider had said, if your child isn't here 5 days a week, starting Monday, we can no longer take them. They can't come here because we have such a staffing issue. We're so short on staff, which is a whole nother thing we
Wow.
get into. But so all these moms were freaking out, like, I don't know where to send my kid to school on Monday because I have to go to work or I'm not going to be able to go to work.
Hmm.
Um, and that was when I started to really dive into like the actual employment aspect of this, like how much childcare providers are paid, why there's so much turnover, recruitment and retention is really difficult. And that also lends to why there's so many wait lists, why it's so expensive. So it's just like one thing kept compounding the other.
Well, let's go into that a little bit more on the business side. We often think of this on just our side as moms. It's hard to find a daycare or a nanny or a babysitter, especially as we grow our village. But it's also hard to find because of everything going on the business side and those extra factors that we don't necessarily look at. So go into more depth about that as you just touched on.
Sure. So childcare providers in Pennsylvania on average make $15.50 an hour. And so when you can go to Target or, name any job, and you can make $20 an hour, $22 an hour, where you have a much lower stress environment, that's more appealing than being in, a high stress childcare environment where you're making $15 an hour. And so there's a lot of overturn when it comes to these childcare centers. And what I've learned in this process is like, people always say, but it's so expensive. You're sending your kids to daycare, and it's like, okay, well, they have rent to pay. Their insurance rates are out of control. If they provide food, they're paying for that. They have to pay their employees. They have to pay their utilities. And the only thing that they can control is salary. So you're seeing from the centers, they're not able to recruit and retain good people. So the centers are then closing, or they have staffing issues, which then leads to the workforce issues from, an employment perspective, where parents aren't able to put their kids into the centers. So actually the most startling statistic I've heard is Pennsylvania loses $6.65 billion a year in annual tax revenue and productivity because of childcare breakdowns alone. So 6.65 billion with a B each year because just specifically childcare breakdowns. So when you look at that from an economist standpoint, that's a huge number that the business community needs to start to pay attention to, so that we are not continually seeing people leave the workforce. And then say you work at a large company or a small business, they're going to need to spend money to recruit the next person, train them for the job, and then retain them so that they don't have to deal with this again 6 months, 2 years down the road. So it really does cost an employer their bottom line as well. So when from a holistic point of view, it's a recruitment and retention issue. It's a how much they're getting paid issue. It's we're paying so much on the back end. I mean, I think I paid $30,000 last year in childcare. It's just, more than my mortgage. And so it's just one of those things that just keeps compounding. And that's why I've worked on legislation in various different ways to address this issue from, every angle, because there's just no silver bullet to fix it.
Right. And it's like you said, it's not just a family issue, which is how it is often portrayed to be, as solely a family issue. It's also a business issue, an economic issue, and it just goes round and round and round and continuously has this domino effect that needs something to completely rehash it. But it seems like we haven't been able to find that solution yet, compared to perhaps other countries. Are there any other countries, or maybe even states in the United States, that are doing childcare better than Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so whenever we look to childcare, who's doing it great, actually Kentucky and Michigan are two gold stars. Because it's all about public-private partnerships. So it's the government, the business, and the parent. Everyone has skin in the game. Everyone's involved. The two pieces of legislation that I worked on was a tax credit for parents that in 2013, prior to this bill, Pennsylvania had only matched 30% of the federal credit for childcare. When this bill was passed, it ended up matching 100% of the credit. So yeah, and it life-changing money it was 220,000 families that were able in Pennsylvania alone to claim this credit on their taxes the following year. Incredible. I always say, I'll hang my hat on that for the rest of my career, just having helped that many people. But I've also testified and advocated for bills for employers who put money towards childcare. So my husband works at Vanguard, they do give you a certain percentage that can be put towards childcare. They can then claim a tax credit. Vanguard can claim a tax credit from the government to then, and that could be a small business, like say, a restaurant puts $50 a month towards somebody's childcare, they can then claim a tax credit for that percentage that they're contributing to their employee.
Okay.
We also encourage, like, especially large employers, to work with their local YMCA or Ducklings or Malvern school to say, okay, can you save 10% of your, spots for specific employees of our business? Or we'll see small businesses kind of coupling together where it's like 3 or 4 of them will come together and do something like that. So we always tell business, like, get creative. Even if you're a small business and you can't do much, you can do something. And then you're creating this culture where employees feel valued and they want to be there because their employer cares about, the fact that they have children and need some flexibility.
Let's rewind it back to Kentucky and Michigan. What is that golden standard that they are doing that makes them at the forefront of the gold stars, the golden standard?
Yeah, it's a lot of tax credits. It's a lot of, like I said, public-private partnerships. They're always looking for creative ways to, like, get the state involved. And it's not just giving out money, but it's making sure the business and, like I said, the parent are also included, like making sure everyone's putting something towards the pot, because I think that's more palatable than a lot of like, okay, well, we'll just throw money at it and hope it sticks. One thing that I worked on last year, I have to give major credit to the Schuylkill County Chamber of Commerce, which is in like up north Pennsylvania. They really worked on a recruitment effort for childcare providers, where they had proposed in the governor's budget $50 million for recruitment and retention. So say you signed on to be a new childcare provider employee at a YMCA or a Ducklings, you got a $1,500 sign-on bonus. And that was the state was putting that out there. So the governor's proposal was $50 million. They got $25 million in the budget, which is huge, great first step. So it's things like that where it's like, the government is there and they're providing funding, but also it's like helping not just the providers, but the parents. And so I am like so proud to say, like, was another advocate in that legislation as well, where it's like each year we're kind of inching towards more and more of like, okay, this is a business issue and we are addressing it that way. It's no longer considered a societal issue or a social issue. It's just like, this is straight business.
Yeah. We've mentioned the best. Who's the bottom barrel for child care affordability and accessibility? Tell me the tea.
I don't know. It's so funny. I just had coffee with someone who said that their preschool in DC was $60,000, and I was like, oh my God. And so he just moved here, and I was like, do you feel like so rich now? I mean, you'd know if that was me. You would see signs that I was doing a lot better financially.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just
That's
think it's like,
crazy.
it's so different everywhere you go. Like, I'll say we've got my 3-year-olds in preschool, my 2.5-year-olds in daycare, and then this one coming in a couple weeks. My husband and I look at each other all the time. We're like, oh my God, how are we going to afford this? But infant care on average is like $20,000 a year. So it's like, Pennsylvania specifically, we have a population problem. Like we're the second oldest population in the country. I think somebody recently told me that our first two like tiers of age is 65 and number 2 is 80. So it's like, no wonder people aren't having kids. It's so expensive to have them. Millennials have, student loans, mortgages, childcare for one is so expensive. So it's like you need to incentivize people to want to have more children and stay in this state. So the tax credits are a great way to do that. But I think it's just really difficult to have kids today because they're so expensive, and we're living at a time when mortgage rates are 6.5% and inflation is crazy. So as an employer, keeping all that in mind for your millennial and your Gen Z employees is really important, like I said earlier, to create a culture where people want to work for you, knowing that you actually care about them.
It's funny that you mention like how there's a problem in like a lot of millennials and the younger generation, like we're not having as many kids, and it is, there's a variety of reasons, but one that's probably really at the top of the list is financial stability. And it's funny that you mentioned that. My best friend actually just texted me this morning. Had no idea about this interview, and she was like, I keep seeing everybody everywhere having like their fourth kid, their third kid. Like, she's like, my coworker just had a kid in August, and she just announced that she's pregnant again, and all this stuff. And I don't know how people are doing it. Like, how are they doing it financially? And it's so true, because it's
I don't know
so
how I'm doing it either. Yeah.
it's like, we don't know how we're doing it. We're gonna figure it out somehow,
Yeah,
some
just
way.
figure it out later. Yeah. No, my
What are
husband and I
some?
bought like our move up house, like our big house, because we're like, all right, we're having a third kid. We got to get a bigger house. We got to get bigger
Yeah.
cars. And it's so funny. I just said this one recently. I've never worked so hard in my life. This is the most money I've ever made. And I still don't feel like I'm moving up in the economic world. Like, it's
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah.
crazy.
You're like, when I had no kids, you're like, what would I have done with all of this money?
On vacation, like, it would just be so nice to have a Starbucks coffee once in a while.
Mm-hmm. What would you say are some of those tougher trade-offs that you're seeing a lot of families having to make because of these childcare costs?
Sure. So it's funny. I just was having this conversation yesterday about housing, and I think they're all interconnected. So, like I said, we just bought our new house. We went from a 2.99 mortgage rate to 6.1, which is actually really good right now. They
Yeah.
dipped to 6.1 and went right back to 6.5. Um, but when you are now like really stretched in your budget, your disposable income to maybe go out to dinner at your favorite restaurant or support your favorite small business is
Mm-hmm.
going to take a back seat. So I think that's another part of this economics, bigger picture that a lot of people don't think about is like if you aren't then spending money in your community, like your small businesses and they're suffering too. So it's this is so random, but I just read an article this weekend that pizza sales are down, and it's because the price of pizza is actually up. So like your regular
Wow.
Friday night pizza, maybe you're reconsidering because your grocery bill was already 200 some dollars this week because we're still dealing with, inflationary costs of groceries. Then you have your mortgage. Maybe you're like me and you're still paying off a student loan. And then you have your child care payment and, Pico bill and everything else. So
Mm-hmm.
every dollar you spend now is going to be looked at very differently. And that
Mm-hmm.
disposable income that I think, maybe millennials and Gen Z were used to spending, earlier in life, maybe they're not spending as much anymore.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's a huge trade-off, especially when you might have been used to having more money in the past. I think I just like tallied up what we're spending in childcare, and we have like a whole different system. We have like a daycare that we're kind of part-time to, a nanny. We have a village of my mother-in-law, my mom, so we're like lucky to have that.
Yeah.
So we don't have to pay for daycare 5 days a week right now, which is amazing. But I was tallying up just what we're just what we're paying in general right now, and I was like, I didn't even think I could afford that much money a month. Like, where is this coming from?
The monthly budget spreadsheet is like such a blessing and a curse because then you're like, oh, there's only like $6 left for the rest of the month once we pay our
Yeah.
bill. But yeah, and
Yeah.
then back to your other question too, like if you're paying, like take the gentleman I met with this morning,
Hmm.
$60,000 a year for a preschool, and say you make $90,000, it makes no sense for you to work. Like your
Right.
entire, a majority of your paycheck is going to
Yeah.
childcare. You might consider just leaving the workforce and staying home. And I think that's the biggest thing in this advocacy that, I'm trying to overcome is like good, qualified, productive employees leaving the workplace.
Yeah, and especially for women's career growth, that and like earning potential, I'm sure that
Yeah.
that has a great significance and impact towards that as well.
Yes. One other thing that sort of in this journey I've really come across is like women in their 50s and 60s saying, well, I had it hard, so you should have to as well, which I
Hmm.
absolutely hate that mentality. But it's funny. 2 years ago, this woman came up to me in the bathroom an event and was like, I've heard you say we shouldn't think like that, and I've always thought like that. Or like I struggled and I had to leave the workforce. But I'm not going to think like that anymore because you pointed out how wrong that is. And I was like,
Hmm.
this is amazing. Look at what we're doing here in the women's bathroom. We're solving societal issues. But I think, a lot of women had to leave the workforce in Gen X or boomers, and they either didn't go back or they went back and they were greatly behind their male peers that they maybe started with. So, like you said, earning potential or promotions just weren't there because they took that step back to raise their kids. And what an incredible thing for them to do that and be a part of their children's lives.
Hmm.
But I think it's also like, some women need to like mourn that part of their career of like what could have been.
Yeah.
And I feel like millennial women are just like, we're going to try to make it all work
Yeah.
and, try this like work life balance, raising family. And it's
Bubble.
like, there really is no balance. It's
Yeah.
just, a woman once said to me, like, her partner never gets the best of her. They only get the rest of her at the end of the day.
Huh.
And like, that hit me so hard. Is like, this job's crazy. I work crazy hours, early morning events, late night events, and like, thank God my husband has a flexible job. But like, when I get home late and I'm exhausted, like, my two little boys are tackling me as I'm walking in the door, and it's like so hard. You got to really pick yourself back up and like really be present for them.
Hmm.
And that balance is just really difficult for working moms, even stay at home moms, if you're there all day with your children and then,
Yeah.
trying to keep that up for 12 hours a day. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and it's, we use the verbiage like the working mom's playbook for the podcast, and in truth, it all moms are working moms, whether we're stay at home or
Yeah.
if we are, you know, out working on our careers and momming at the same time. Like we're all working in some way or another, and it's a hard juggle. It's super
Oh, yeah.
hard. It's
And
the
something
high
always
heart
wrong.
rates.
You're
Oh yeah,
something is always, for me, it's like dishes or laundry. It's just like not getting done today, or maybe next week I'll hold that. So,
yeah.
yeah,
It's crazy. It's a really hard thing to catch up on, like catch up from and manage. And like 2 minute quiet car rides are just like they're very good for the soul, even if they're
yeah.
super short. But that's like really all we get unless
My husband
there's
is so
something.
good about, I'll be like, I need to leave the house and I need to just drive and go to the store and walk around for an hour. And he'll be like, go do what you need to do. And I give him major kudos for like when I'm like tapped out, he's like,
Yeah.
go, like go get your
Yeah.
quiet, even if it's at Wawa, go get it.
Oh yeah, I mean it's you need it. It's just there can be so much going on. It can be so overstimulating, and you want to be the best person and best mom that you can be, and it can be really hard when all that is going on. Of course, every industry is going to have some sort of, you know, roadblock with childcare affordability and employee retention when it comes to this and everything else that's related to it. But are there specific industries or types of employers that are being hit particularly harder than others because of the lack of affordability and accessibility?
Yeah, I would say anything where you really see a lot of women. So like teachers, nurses, so the healthcare industry,
Mm-hmm.
the childcare industry itself. Like imagine being a mom making $15 an hour, sending your
Mm-hmm.
children to childcare where you're paying $40,000 a year. Like that's almost your full salary.
Yeah.
So I think that's a part of it too, where the statistics crazy, like 98% or 99% of childcare providers are women. And so in
Wow.
these like really women dominated fields, like I mentioned earlier, the veterinarian who called me and was like, I read your piece. and it all makes sense. It's just women here. Um,
Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of jobs that are just very, that attract women. And so when they are having kids, like they need to make, or they want to have kids, then they need to make the
Hmm.
decision of like, is this right for me to do? Because, I'll either need to leave or take time off. And so, I think it crosses every industry, but especially those where you see more women.
Yeah. How did this look pre-COVID versus post-COVID? I feel like that's always like a
Definitely,
good
yeah,
marker
definitely a
of
lot more centers. So even now, we're still seeing like the drawbacks of COVID was those centers
okay.
closing,
Yeah.
or staff being laid off and then not having the funds to sort of bring them back.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know the specific numbers, but I know like even in Pennsylvania, there's like 1,200 spots or 1,500 spots still open at childcare providers across the state, which
Hmm.
could serve another 25,000 kids. But they just like either can't afford to hire them or don't have the resources to hire them, or they can't find the talent because
Hmm.
like I said, you can go to another job and maybe a much less stressful job, or we see a lot of childcare workers get hired into school districts where they can their hours are different, they're getting paid more, they have the summers off. So that actually is a big issue within the childcare industry, is the employees are leaving just for those types of opportunities.
Right.
um, which is good for the employee, but again, it just puts so much on the provider to, and there's some regulatory issues, like you have to have certain degrees to be alone with children, or, the rules, the ratio rules. And obviously you want childcare to be a highly regulated industry. These are our children. We want them around the best of the best with a lot of rules, but do you need a specific early education degree, or could a mom of five who wants to get back in the workforce and maybe go cuddle babies at the
Hmm.
YMCA, could she qualify to then, be a teacher and not need somebody with a specific degree in early education to be
Yeah.
alone with the kids? So that part of two, the ratios and like how many you need per classroom and what degrees you need and the continuing education credits, which cost money,
Hmm.
that all lends to it as well.
Yeah. In combination with the fact that the world right now is just so incredibly expensive, it's hard to catch up more now than I feel like ever before.
Yep, yep. And that's why the tax credits are
Hmm.
so good, because it's like, all right, you're paying this money out, but you're getting it back,
Hmm.
later. So
Right.
that's like, it's like a nice, at least that's some of that is coming back to you.
Exactly. So then what other kinds of solutions aside from, we've already talked about the tax credit. What other kinds of solutions, whether they be local, state, federal, could actually continue to help move the needle here in the right direction?
I think easing some of the regulations on the education needs. Um, I talked to a woman who owns a childcare center and she has a degree in social work. And she's like, I can't even be alone with the kids. So it's like,
Oh,
that, yeah, like that stringent kind of
okay.
policy is not helpful. And like I said, like a mom of five has more experience than, any 22-year-old in the world that's coming out of an early education degree to then get hired.
Hmm.
So maybe easing up a little there. It's good that so many businesses and elected officials are talking about this. Like this has literally been on the forefront of Pennsylvania politics for the last 3 years because of local chambers of commerce across Pennsylvania. I have such good partners in this sphere. Was literally in the governor's office 2 days ago, with all of his policy secretaries and a bunch of chambers talking about why we need to keep going on this issue. So the fact that it is continually talked about, I have so much hope that we can continue moving forward.
Hmm.
But yeah, just like pilot programs, looking at different states and seeing like how do we get creative. And the business itself, if you can't stand up your own childcare, maybe you have an emergency center, for emergencies.
Hmm.
Or 2 years ago, we actually had a women's event with 200 women and we provided childcare. So like you could bring your kids,
Oh, that's
and it
amazing.
was It was because my mom and my husband were both away, and I was like, I
Mm,
don't know where to bring these kids. And like we had
yeah.
Mayor Sherelle Parker coming in, and I was like, all right. So we ended up the venue is a country club and had a childcare center in the basement for wine night for the ladies. I was like, this is perfect. Um, so we literally, they had hired two babysitters. We had six kids that came through, and like, I did learn a lesson though because we booked the babysitters 5 to 7 and the event ran over. So I literally had to finish the event holding my 1 year old at the podium, and he was like using the microphone. It was like a total mess, but
Yeah.
it just showed how flexible you had. There's 200 business people in the room. It just was like, this is it, people. This is how you have to be. Things
Mhm.
happen. So we always encourage employers to like just really be understanding of like the world is different now, and
Yeah.
kids get sick, and childcare providers call out last second, and so
Mhm.
you just kind of have to wing it.
Yeah, it kind of goes into the definition of what a modern day family friendly workplace is actually going to look like, not in theory, but in practice. I mean, it's so easy for an employer to say more flexible with your kid's schedule. Your kid gets off the bus by 3:30, like, you need to be there, that's fine. Your kid's sick, you need to work from home, that's fine. But then actually doing it like in real life
Yeah,
and not holding it against the employee while like being able to say like, well, I've been very flexible with you. It
yeah,
should really just come in play and in tandem with everything because it's it's hard. I mean,
yeah,
I don't have a child in school yet, and thankfully we're in this post-COVID world with work where I can work from home with most professions within my industry. But it's I like think back and I'm like, in a pre-COVID world, how were people getting their kids off the buses?
yeah. My son's school ends at 2:45. I'm like, what? Like, how am I supposed to just leave work in the middle of the day? So
Yeah,
like,
or like,
I'll go
yeah,
get him and bring him back here. And then I'm just
yeah.
like, everyone on staff is just kind of like, we're communally babysitting him until I get my work done and then go get the other one. And thank
Hmm.
God I work with good people and I'm in charge
Yeah,
here because like any other boss would be like, why is your 3 year old here running
yeah.
around causing a ruckus? And I'm just like, sorry.
And it can be so hard on both ends, right? I mean, the bus is obviously a scheduled thing, but then there's also, your kid is sick. Or if we go back to COVID times, I'm sure a lot of parents would be getting calls like, your your kid's class was exposed to COVID. We're sending everybody home right now. Come get your kid, drop everything in a second, and you're just like,
Can't even Yeah,
you're
can't even
like,
imagine.
I can't.
Literally, anytime I see my son's school come up on my phone, I'm like, oh God, what is it? Obviously, I have to go get him, whatever it is. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's so difficult. Like, so our drop off is like, we have to be out of our house by 7:15, which like with a 3 year old, a 2 year old, and like my 37-year-old husband, I'm
And a
like,
newborn in a few
yeah,
weeks.
like it's gonna be crazy. Like getting the dog ready, lunch is packed, breakfast, like uniform on, get out the door, and then like drop off is at 8 and 8:15, and then pick
Hmm.
up is 2:45, and then we can pick up my other one between 4 and 5. But it's like that is not working parents' schedule, so
No, it's not.
it's just chaos like every day. And I
Hmm.
think too, just like being in that cortisol infused mindset all the time, like somebody check in on us moms. Like we are
We're not
struggling.
okay.
We're not okay. And like this is expectation. Like I think you posted something the other day, like you're expected to work but expected to not work, and you're expected to be home with your kids but not be home with your kids. And like
Yep.
it's just like we need to just change how we think about having kids, because we do need to have more kids, and how we can still be productive members of society and in the workplace. Like we just need as a whole to have like a full mindset change.
So then, for the mom, for our fellow moms here who are listening, who are feeling tired, who are feeling stressed out, who are feeling completely lost or defeated because of childcare costs and perhaps a lack of a village that leads to even more childcare costs. What would you want them to know right now? What is your advice or your words of wisdom?
You're not alone. I think the biggest thing I've learned throughout this process is asking for help is and being honest is so key. So like at the chamber, when I first started this, it's a lot of C-suite like executives, like CEOs, CFOs, males in their 50s and 60s who are kind of like, I don't get it. And it wasn't until I really was like, this is what we're all going through that people started to be like, oh, okay, yeah, this is something we should, get involved in and advocate for. Like I said, like what's a chamber doing? Usually we're talking about taxes and permitting reform, but housing, public transportation, childcare, these are all business issues because they affect your bottom line. And so for the moms, especially those who work, like being honest with your employer, like this is everything that's going on right now and that I'm trying to work through. And hopefully you work at a company that values you as an employee and not just a number, that they can replace. But
Yeah.
having the tools to say, it will affect you if I leave because of X, Y, and Z, everything we just talked about. It will cost you money. So it's better to invest in me and my family now so that you're able to, you don't have to pay somebody later to do all these things to replace me. I think that's really important. And just like every week, I'm like asking a girlfriend or like my mom works, but I'm like, can you leave work early and, try to help us out here? And it's like you said, the village, just like you just have to keep asking and good people will, be there for you.
Yeah. It's almost like an affirmation that you need to say to yourself in front of the
I think a
mirror
lot
every
of
morning.
Yeah, like a lot of people are afraid to ask because your friends are busy and like, like I said, my mom works and people have lives and I totally understand that. But if you can come over and watch my kid for 2 hours while I take this meeting, like
Yeah.
that does more for me than you will ever know.
Yeah.
And I do feel really lucky that I do have such a village.
Well, I have learned so much from this conversation. I know our listeners will as well. For our listeners, where can they continue to learn more about your work and possibly get involved in advocacy efforts towards this cause?
Sure. So I always give a plug. There's an organization called the Pennsylvania Early Learning Investment Commission.
Okay.
Um, Government loves their acronyms. It's called ELIC, ELIC. They really break down the employment aspect of it. They break down the child care provider aspect of it, and they break down the parent payment.
Okay.
So that to me is like my go-to and where I get all my facts and figures and like ideas. And I keep getting asked more and more to talk about this via various businesses. And I always go to my like nonprofit partners. There's an organization called Children's First, which is they do incredible work. First Up is another one. And they're just like statewide childcare focused nonprofits that do just
Okay.
amazing advocacy. And then from the chamber's perspective, like, we have a very active women in business committee that's always, talking about things like this. But I would say just like making sure you know it's available to you, especially with the tax credits, and even talking to your employers about tax credits that are available to them because of this different legislation that's been passed.
Great. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been a huge help, and I
Yeah.
identify with this, as many moms will, because it is rough out there. And between the financials of it all, having to trust somebody to watch and parent your kid while you're off trying to focus on work and curating your village, it can be it's just difficult. It's a really hard task that should really be so simple. So I thank you for coming on to talk about it more. For
Yeah,
our
thank you so
listeners,
much for
thank you so
having
much for
me.
tuning in. Yes, I'm so excited. We were finally able to connect. And, for our listeners, definitely visit Laura, and on her Instagram, and all of the links that she just spoke about, we'll link them in the show notes as well. And thank you guys all so much for listening. I hope you got a lot out of the episode, and you can tune in again to the Working Moms Playbook next Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you.